Hello, Gwen.
Okay, and belt and suspenders recording locally. Okay. Very good. Okay, good. We will call to order this meeting of a special meeting of the Joint Policy Committee for Eastern Reading Region 9, 9:04 a.m. Members present: Maureen, Chris, Gwen, and John. And we are joined by Dr. Pearson Ugal. First order of business is the approval of minutes for the October 23rd, 2020 Joint Policy Committee meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Chris. Moved by Maureen, seconded by Chris. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimously approved. Moving us to public comment. No members of the public being present. That moves us to item number 4, committee member comment. Hearing none, moves us to item number 5, discussion and possible action. Item A, resume work through the 3000 series. So we have the 3000 series. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. 3000 series, as well as the sort of other policy items that may be of a time-sensitive nature. Are we interpreting time-sensitive nature to include joint policies, or have we removed those intentionally from this agenda? Does anybody know? Because I thought we had specifically asked that the sort of joint.
You mean the tri-board governance work?
Exactly.
Yeah, I thought that was becoming a sort of evergreen portion of our agenda until that settles, but I haven't looked closely.
Agreed.
I have no objection to discussing it. I just thought that it was going to not be something that was going to involve just 1 hour. And if Stephanie's here, let's take her input on what she needs to provide us with input.
Okay. Yeah, and I also think that sort of other policy items that may be of issue or time-sensitive requirement, I don't think that meets the requirement of specificity.
It doesn't fairly cover. It's like saying other business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So okay. So bear with me 1 second.
I do think generally we should endeavor to have some sort of a time frame on the tri-board governance question. Agreed. And when we want to sort of land that plane and how we want to land it. There's an argument to be made that the January tri-board is a reasonable target to have a formal recommendation, if not before that. But
agreed.
I'm all for going back for it. Today, I'm a little bit tired.
Yeah. Yeah. Understood there. Okay. Okay. So I have the 3000 series pulled up, and I'll share my screen here. And it's just scrolling through, but I know we're down here.
Motion to increase the Zoom.
Thank you. For those of us who still have not gotten to an optometrist to fix it.
No kidding.
And I desperately need to at this point because I'm constantly doing that.
Okay. Okay, we should be, I believe we were on page 76 the last time we left. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we were talking about the possibility of skipping this policy. I know Chris had made a comment back in August about the possibility of skipping this policy. Do we have any thoughts about that?
I don't remember why Chris wanted to skip it.
Okay, yep, sorry, let's go to the top. So hazardous materials in schools, right? any substance or mixture of the substance posing fire, explosive, reactive, or health hazards, including number of science laboratory chemicals and special, et cetera, et cetera. Superintendent of schools shall develop regulations to minimize the use of these materials in the schools, including substituting when possible, et cetera, et cetera.
So I would say that's already in place. Whether this is policy or just following some kind of state regulation. But this is certainly already in place. Certainly with respect to science lab materials and the art room, any hazardous materials. And then I think further down it talks about pesticide. And of course we have regulations about pesticide application.
So if I think it's good that we're already doing this. Is there a reason why we would remove this policy?
Can you go down to the legal references?
Yeah. That becomes the real question, right? Is this enshrined in policy?
Are we doing this for a purpose to comply with the law, or are we doing this to create sort of an aspirational expectation?
Right.
Because we're saying superintendent create regulations to endeavor to reduce the amount of
Right.
things.
Right.
Too many split infinitives, folks.
Right. If we're, I don't want to obviously not be complying with the law, but I also don't want to be creating additional work and expectation of regulations where we don't necessarily need them, because it's an enumerated duty at this point, and I don't want somebody to come and say, "Show me your regulations, please."
Right.
To the extent that there's not some body of regulation that exists.
Sure. So I think at a minimum, we would be talking about revising this language to simply sort of state as is required by law items that are highlighted in 5142.
As a sort of technical question, this talks about oven cleaner and other things that go on within the kitchen.
Yep.
Those are employees of Chartwell's, as I understand it. So
Okay.
I want to understand when it's saying training of appropriate staff, does the superintendent maintain an obligation to train the staff of a third-party vendor?
Mhm.
I hope not.
No.
I would like to avoid the implication that that's the case, because we're imposing obligations upon kitchen staff here, but really that should be contracted for with a vendor.
Okay.
And so if there's a training obligation, if we're going to keep this, we should also make sure that any vendors who are on site performing these services are asked to comply with the same regulations, or shall be expected to comply with the same regulations. Like the folks to cut the grass shouldn't just be using pesticides haphazardly and things like that.
Adjust policy to remove aspirational statements and simply state the specifics relevant to law.
Right, and avoid
Without creating new
unintended obligations, basically, particularly with respect to third parties.
I think is it reasonable for us to say that sort of our contracts with the third parties should all include expectations that they're doing X, Y, and Z, and we have an obligation to sort of check in with them and say, view that they are doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think as sort of an aspirational item for our new director of finance and operations, I would like to sort of synthesize a contract review checklist almost.
Yes.
That says operationally, when it comes to software as a service contract, state law requires that you have this language. Here's the ER9 language for this. It's going to go in, which I know we already do in some contexts. But when it comes to something like this would also sort of fall into the category of, from a contract review and compliance perspective, let's make sure that we're aligning all of our contracting practices with policy and regulation.
Yep. Okay, good. All right, so this becomes a to-do, to adjust this language, which I think is a sort of a larger task in sort of wordsmithing and sort of research against these. Do we have a sense of who we would assign that to. Do we want to put this to Shipman? Right, sort of identifying what's aspirational versus what's required by law, sort of all that stuff.
That's going to be a big task for them. I think it's not a read this and react. It is a read this, do a summary of what might be applicable, and then write us an opinion letter.
Right.
So this is not a small task. I don't think you're
I
not
think
sending them
right.
out a 15-minute task. You're
I think that's right.
And I don't know how that plays into the decision. I think to start this, somebody asks for the other contracts that might be implicated, right? Because
I would say the director of finance and facilities has an important role in this, because that individual currently oversees the expectation that a head custodian, for example, maintains certain records and is up to date with training and expectations, and then the same with food service. And the only part that really falls more under other administration would be science lab. So our department chair makes sure that someone participates in the annual training about science lab and hazardous materials.
Do we maintain safety sheets in each of the 5 principals' offices?
In the building office, it's not necessarily in the principal's office, but. So safety sheets, I guess I need a little clarification on safety sheets. The pesticide application binder is in every school office. Safety sheets, I mean, that, I need to know what that is.
I don't know, and it just to me pops out as, cranky person's FOI request who says, show me your safety sheets, and it just turns into a distraction.
Yeah, I think there are 2 things here. One is the third-party review and sort of the contract language. That's a big task. But I also think that removing the aspirational statements, comparing sort of what is here versus what is required by law, is also not a 15-minute task. And I would prioritize number 1 first, because I think that the policy languages itself should be adjusted to, take out any and also solve for, us not having enough rainbows. We need item number 2 to be done, but I think that's a bigger task for us to do.
Can you scroll back to the statute that it references? Yep. I'm curious what that says. That's 19A. Isn't 19A the penal code?
I don't think so. No, let's look.
No, I'm tired too.
Yeah.
Asbestos, public health and well-being. Yeah, 19.
It's probably posting notice about pesticide applications, if I'm guessing. Oh no, it says asbestos abatement.
Asbestos.
Well, that's a whole different kettle of worms, because I have no idea what asbestos is in the school, nor do I know that the policy committee wants to do the deep dive.
Yeah, 19A 332D imposes criminal penalties with respect to asbestos and school facilities. Yeah, there's notice about doing asbestos work. And it's a delegation that there shall be regulations with respect to asbestos from the Commissioner of Public Health. So the statute upon which all this is based is purely the asbestos statute.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so there's maybe a little bit more research to do. I wonder, do we have any?
Seems to me that the research is in a couple of veins. One is, let's find out what the practices and procedures are presently. Two, what are the contractual obligations vis-a-vis Chartwell, and have we just put in a line in that contract or tell someone next time it's renegotiated, by the way, you are responsible for your own hazardous materials policies, and we are not.
Yep.
You must comply with all federal, state, and local law with respect to hazardous materials, which are defined as, and then probably defined.
Right.
Those are
Yeah.
the two components. And then the third component follows after that, and that's the synthesis that becomes this policy, right?
Yeah.
So it seems to me without one and two, we're kind of going to be walking in the dark a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're nowhere close to turning this into an actual policy at this point. We need to
Yep.
have a fact finding first.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the specifics that we see in this list make me think that there's more to this than just the citation, just the call out to the asbestos law. Because
Probably
this,
federal.
maybe, and maybe it's just not properly cited. And these are what I'm thinking about here is, I wonder if we should actually be reaching out to the CABE policy folks and to let them understand first. I don't think they know that we've been doing this process for ourselves. I highly doubt they've been tuning into our YouTube.
To our YouTube channel?
It could be, but to let them know that we're doing it, and that, through this process, we have certain principles that we've sort of come to, and would love to get their perspective on that. And then also for them to be an escalation point for us. It seems reasonable that we should be able to say, hey, this is essentially only citing asbestos
Right.
law. Is there something else? Because I'm not seeing a clear connection between
This
these
is a
policies.
proposed policy,
Right.
basically.
That's right.
And the answer might be, some district somewhere decided they wanted to spell this out, and we liked it, and so we adopted it as a model policy because,
Right. Because
reason.
I think then the question becomes, can we get some agreement from them that we start seeing policy coming out of CABE that is more clearly tagged as, here's the sort of minimum to meet the law, here's the sort of aspirational, and then here's the, whatever else.
Right. Things you might want to consider versus things that are core to the functional operation of a district.
Exactly. Right. Okay.
Right. Because there's nothing per se wrong with having this policy or this substance of policy. We just need to understand whether it's compulsory or optional.
That's right.
Mhm.
So I can take that as a takeaway, is to reach out to the CABE folks and see if I can figure out who's working on their policy stuff. And
That would be Vin Mustafaro.
okay. That'll be enough for me to follow up. Okay, good. I think specifically now we're sort of diving in on the pesticide question. I think Maureen had a question, and then Chris, you had a question as well. Stephanie, is it accurate to say you're not the right person to answer?
Well, I mean, I'm reading that this is what speaking from my memory as a building principal, this is the procedure that we follow. There's notification that's provided, and we are good about keeping the paperwork filed in the main office of each school.
This is done privately too. I don't know if you all have had, someone come out and exterminate for mice, but you get a notice of the pesticides applied. You have to sign it. They post on your lawn, blah, 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 blah. So it's not that different from what's done residentially.
Yeah, I suspect the people who do this work, regardless of where they're doing it, are quite careful about operating within the bounds of the law.
Right. I mean, to a certain extent, this is nitpicky. It says pest control applicators employed by the district.
Right.
I mean, that implying that that's a custodian doing the job versus a contractor.
hire a
I don't think it's intended to.
Right. Should this say employed or contracted by the district?
Yes.
Yeah. And then my comment from August is just basically with respect to thinking about the content of fields that are under the purview partially of our park and rec of the town as opposed to the district, and what sort of the overlap is and who has those obligations. But if this is only providing a restriction with respect to that which is directed by the district, it kind of is what it is, to make a difference. And I assume without knowing that the town is under the same obligation.
There'd be no reason why they weren't.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I think you can delete those other comments.
Yep.
Yeah.
For what it's worth.
Yep. Are we okay leaving it as superintendent or his or her designee, or do we want to specifically say director of buildings and grounds?
I don't think it makes a difference. It's just going to be another enumerated duty on someone's list.
Right. Yeah. And actually,
And that person has a different title in the different districts.
Right. And I was going to say, keeping it as or designee allows for flexibility with respect to org charts as they have.
yep. This is version
This looks like it's an alternate version of that policy.
Yeah. And the response is no, thank you. Too much aspirational language.
Pests are living organisms, John. That's what it says.
Okay.
I mean, I would be comfortable just deleting that.
Me too.
I'm going to the bottom.
There's some citations.
Yeah, there is.
Wait a sec. That might be the law CGS 10-31C.
Pesticide plans at schools without an integrated pest management plan, required prior notice. That's 10-231C.
Yep.
There's the whole 10-231 A, B, C, D is all about pest control at schools and pesticide application at schools.
So I guess the question has to do with the parent handbook. I'll check one of them right now just to get a sense.
Okay. So I'm a little bit confused because this is much more comprehensive.
Yes.
Also here at the bottom of this this pesticide section, we've got a significant amount of statutes referenced.
Yeah.
Do we have the current version that CABE puts out of this policy, or is this a cut and paste from some series of prior versions such that we've lost something along the way?
It is possible that that's the case. This is probably a year old. So the question is whether or not CABE has given us any updates of the 3000 series.
What's the policy number?
This is 3524-1.
When they circulate revisions, they usually email them from the CABE listserv. And the last time I see an update where that policy pings is July of 2019.
Mhm.
And there's a summary of notifications required by state legislation. And so they sent 41 lists of 41 bulleted list of required notifications, and then another 48 of recommended notifications. And so this is they listed this as one of them. It's not a revised
Yep.
policy.
Yep. I think the two versions, they both reference, I think we just scrolled past in the last one because we didn't have any comments. So you see, this has all the legal references. It's just a more concise version. And to Maureen's point about version number 2, it has more aspirational language. So I don't think we're missing anything if we delete version number 2. It's just a more concise, less aspirational version.
Yep.
Has more citations at the end too.
So my first check of a student handbook in Easton shows the integrated pest management, green cleaning, asbestos management program. It does not make reference to the Connecticut general statutes.
I think the statute just demands that there be the notice. I don't think you need to reference the statute is what's compelling the notice.
So I'll continue checking, but my hunch is we'll find the same thing in each one of the schools.
Right. And then I'm seeing an entire regulation section. More regulation. Okay.
Move them.
Bye-bye.
Something cathartic about that bye-bye.
Yes, indeed. Okay. I think we can leave this as is. Silly, but I agree. Okay, good.
Obviously, I looked at this some time ago. It was July,
Mhm.
but is it a blanket fidelity bond, $100,000 per occurrence, or $100,000 blanket fidelity bond? I mean, I haven't looked at those in a long time. Certainly don't write those, but I would imagine it would be a bigger number if it's cumulative. And it might even be a bigger number if it's a singular time. I don't know. I don't know what happens.
Yeah. I don't know what our current practice is either.
What's the purpose of this?
If anyone runs off with the farm,
Yeah.
you have a third party you can go against, right? So what a fidelity bond just does is it says, hey, he forged a check, sent it to vendor XYZ, and vendor XYZ cut the check back to him, and the whole thing was a circle game. Oh, we're going to go back against the bondholder.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think we should just figure out what the custom and practice is. And I think $100,000 is a little on the low side if it's cumulative.
Okay, so this remains an open issue. What's the sort of appropriate path to have somebody look into this and to do something about it?
Who would pay for that fidelity bond every year?
Right. Who's going out to market to get it? How many people are covered for this? Like, because all school system employees who handle funds, that's a lot of people theoretically.
Yeah, I think the language has got to be looked at, but we first have to see what's done. I mean, you certainly don't need, somebody covered for petty cash, but
Right.
you do want coverage.
Right. Anybody in the finance operation, basically, who's doing any kind of accounts payable work or budget reconciliation work, you'd want to be covered under this policy.
Okay.
So I suppose we can ask Scott or his replacement what in practice is done.
Mm-hmm.
Unless Stephanie, you have any idea? Do you have any idea what's done?
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the Joe Barlow handbook right now to find the integrated pest management. What was the question?
Do you have any idea what's done in terms of bonds for finance and operations?
I don't know.
Okay.
I certainly don't recall from seeing any budgeted items for paying premiums on any of these bonds.
Me neither.
I mean, it could be rolled into sort of the cumulative, you know, here's what our insurance costs are discussion on the P&C side, but I don't know.
These are usually not big premiums in any
No,
way. They're usually small, so,
especially if you're
That's-
only covering $100,000.
right.
Okay. So are we saying this is research for the next director of finance and operations?
I think so.
Welcome to ER9. Tell me about your bond.
If we're
Not that we think you need it. We just want to know that you have it.
Vicky might have some information. I can ask Vicky.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also wonder about if you know, like it's possibly not just a function of what happens here, but what happens elsewhere. This would be a quick answer from Shipman.
As to what we pay for, I don't know.
No, what I mean,
what's
like
Oh, what happens elsewhere? Yes, I
the
agree with
noise.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's standard? They could probably say.
Right.
So all in task.
Yep. Okay. Right. Provide maximum safety of students.
I agree with Chris. Provide for the safety of students is fine.
Okay. What do we think about this one?
We have not always owned our buses,
Mhm.
so the district-owned buses part is not necessarily accurate.
That's where it's by private carrier.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
so
or through. Okay,
Okay.
sorry. Tired.
Very tired. That we're here is a testament, right? So we're going with that. We're here. We're trying, and that's good.
Policy persists.
Yep. There you go. Your perfect alliteration for a Friday morning.
Is there any reason why we need to state this? We can do this all day long, but is there a reason why we have to put it into policy?
I think the transportation
down
for
to the
homeless
statute.
students is probably something that has to be in policy. There's probably some compliance on that being, within the scope of providing public education, right? But I don't
agree.
know.
I just mean this part, right? The
Oh.
parents may be reimbursed. If we want to make that a policy, great. But we could also just make it something that we do. There's nothing that forbids us from doing that.
Agreed.
Yeah. Like at the discretion of the board, parents may be blah, blah, blah. It feels like a bit of a foothold for somebody who says, I choose to drive my kids and you should pay me back.
Right. I totally agree with that.
Give me my mileage every day.
Right.
So I believe that there is a practice in place with this for students at Barlow who attend schools, attend the magnet schools. If the parents provide the transportation, I believe that we do reimburse some amount to them. The only example I can think of.
Are we statutorily required to do that?
I don't know that we are, but I think it's a lot less expensive than providing the bus.
We're required to provide the transportation, so if you can negotiate a result,
Right.
that's cheaper.
Right. Got it.
So either we provide the bus or we reimburse.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you just scroll down to the reference real fast, Jen?
Pick your poison.
Equipment and color.
Use of standard school bus required when? maybe, no.
Yeah, I don't think any of this none of this suggests that we need to be in the business of paying, but I think that the discretion is helpful in circumstances like Stephanie's talking about. And I think it's just important that the language reflect that it is the board's discretion and
Right.
not some sort of parent's choice to name their price.
Okay.
Good. Cool. Regulation, we'll just ignore it for now. We don't need to spend our time deleting. Would we say responsibility of the superintendent, his or her designee? I mean, I think what we're saying is the designee can include somebody we're contracting to.
Sure. Designee or assignee in that sense, but
Yeah, I mean, I guess that it gets into, does the designee of the superintendent of schools, let's say the business manager, still maintain the responsibility to supervise for a student and ensure that they are doing these things?
Right.
Like who ultimately owns that obligation, and can you completely distance yourself from it?
Yeah, I'm very sensitive to that. The idea, I mean, see private prisons, right?
right.
We can't just contract this out to a private contractor and then say, oh, we didn't know. We maintain an oversight responsibility.
Yes, and functionally, that's exactly what occurs.
Yeah. So I think manage is not quite right for the contracting it out, but to
I mean, they
oversee.
maintain oversight.
Yeah.
Right.
To maintain oversight.
I'm not sure it's I wouldn't use supervise either. It's not like
Right.
we're evaluating them.
Maintain oversight of the school transportation service and in connection there to do the following.
Or to ensure the following is done. Because this suggests that the designee is doing the following as opposed to ensuring that it is done.
Right. There's a fair amount of delegation here with the different tasks.
Mm-hmm.
That should be 10-186.
Good.
I think that can resolve the comment too.
Yep.
I think you can resolve this comment with just leaving it as it is.
Yep.
Yeah, this seems repetitive and feels like we're into a regulation.
Yeah, I think I'm wondering
Maybe laid out the mileage up above.
Checking. We do have this weird break here. See, this is all.
There's a regulation that starts somewhere up here.
Yep. There we go. Okay. So this whole section.
It almost looks to me like it was two separate sets of regulations that were combined at some point
Yeah.
because it's repetitive again.
Mhm.
Regulation approved.
Yep. Okay. All right. Bus drivers. You stopped here, Chris, on the 14th of August.
But resumed again on October 9th.
October 9th.
And he stopped at 1:08 a.m.
Yeah.
It was,
Okay. Obligations to policy, contract with the vendor. So only drivers approved in advance in writing may operate vehicles for the district. We're saying approved in advance by the vendor, right? Like,
we don't approve them.
right.
Right, like we have certain expectations that they do certain things to make sure that their drivers are appropriate.
Right. Do we want to say only drivers properly screened by the vendor?
I mean, they're following appropriate hiring practices, which are regulated by law.
Mhm.
So they have to go through the same process of background checks and everything else that we do, but they do it.
Right. I mean, this says superintendent or designee shall approve all drivers. I mean, it's getting into really operational nitty gritty that I'd like to think that we've contracted away.
Mhm.
Is this one of those contracts we want to put in the contracts to take a cursory review of to make sure that we have, just like the Chartwell's contract, to make sure that the Chartwell's contract is dealing with pesticides? And I don't know the answer to that. It's just,
I think that makes sense. I recall when we went through the bus contract process, this was a discussion point and making sure that they were checking all the boxes with respect to hiring and supervision.
when was the last time the bus contract was done?
Recently.
Really
This is the
recently?
second year with the vendor, so it was a year and a half ago.
Okay, so certainly more recently than this policy was last taken a look at.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think we were looking at this before because we're not so sure if we want to engage in this. And the question is this, is the superintendent or designee required to do this? Because of law?
It's all done by the vendor.
Right. I mean, but I think what we're hoping is, and that's okay. Right. It is possible that there is a law that says, no, the superintendent has to actually look at all of the drivers and review that they are sort of eligible to participate as drivers.
I like the phrase first aid experience,
Yeah.
like not training or
Yeah.
participate.
Right. We're talking about
Well,
a
the
performance
substitute driver
assessment.
has been in 3 different wrecks, and so has lots of experience rendering aid.
Yeah.
Is not.
Been in a lot of street fights. Got this.
Levity is important on a Friday morning. Thank you, Gwen.
Part of the policy experience.
That's right.
Yes, it's all part of the policy experience.
We endeavor to provide.
We should put a disclaimer on John's YouTube channel. You know, dry humor likely, dark hypotheticals preferred.
Zany lawyerness. Danger.
Danger, lawyering ahead.
Oh,
Okay, so
that point between fatigue and sort of breaking down laughing over things that are funny, but not quite as funny as.
Right, none of this is really funny. It's just-
I think this is thrown into the bucket with the section above where we look at the law and yeah, good. So
Yeah.
So CF 3541.23 you just scroll past bus contractor compliance.
Yep.
That seems to be a key policy to all of this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Our bus contractor shall do everything it needs to do, is hopefully what that says.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Move to forms. Yes, of course. Yep. This is not a thing.
Yes, it's not a thing.
Yeah. So to deal with this, I think we are saying just like super no to that. And hold on, sorry, for board approval, the school bus contractor shall submit at the time of bid a list of, at the time of bid.
Right. And that's how it's been handled. They said, we intend to serve you with 40-foot buses with their model year 2020, 2019,
Right.
2018, whatever it is. That's all standard. The
Right.
concern is, yes, I agree
Right.
that every August 1st, they should tell us again what their fleet is they intend to service us with. I don't really think that the board needs to adopt a motion to accept the list of buses.
Agreed. Good.
I'm also not interested in approving every driver.
No.
I can see a lot of different ways that goes sideways.
Yeah.
Not the least of which is time.
Right. It's our annual bus driver review meeting.
Right. Everybody buckle in. This tri-board's going to be 12 hours long.
Only.
Then you get parents. This one time, the bus driver for Route X showed
Right.
up 3 minutes late. I don't want him again.
Right. And this bus driver hasn't signed a loyalty oath. Vendor needs to follow the law. Okay. Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Perform his or her duties in accordance with state, federal, and local requirements, the state, federal, local regulations and law, whatever you want to say, including a TB test. That must be pulled out of some statute. That's archaic.
There's a
It says
specific
every bus
statute that
driver
requires
must
a
have a
TB
TB test.
But I mean, they need to have a health card. They need to pass a physical. They need to do all these things, and that changes over time.
Mhm.
And so to just say each school bus driver shall be required to meet the minimum acceptable standards under state and federal and local law for operating a school bus.
I wouldn't say the minimum applicable. I would just say the applicable standards.
State and federal standards.
Sure. I doubt there are local ones.
To be eligible to transport children for the Board of Education or
To operate a school bus.
to operate a school bus.
This sort of falls into the same thing.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, you can almost roll 3 into 4 and say contracts for transportation shall require all of these things.
Sounds good as it is.
Okay.
This looks like a regulation
It
suddenly.
is. I don't know. It's not tagged as reg, but
Go to the bottom and see if it says regulation adopted on.
yeah.
No,
No.
Okay.
just a wordy policy.
Yeah, very wordy policy. So I think, hold on, let me just verify. Nope. Okay. So here, I think this is a bit of a silly.
This is crazy.
Yep.
I can't imagine the study of our towns that would be
Right.
required to figure this out. I mean,
School
Exactly.
district announces
have
that
sidewalks.
every street is hazardous.
Right.
Right, basically.
they all have,
Entire town unduly hazardous. School board.
most have hills,
Like-
obstructions.
And never mind the fact that unduly hazardous, that kind of boilerplate language is really dangerous and illegal.
Right.
Well,
It's awful.
I've read this because of when we switched carriers, they stopped sending a bus down my road. So they were like, yeah, you're good. Just go
Your
to
road is
107.
unduly hazardous.
But there's like definitions of hazard, and it includes open water and railroad crossings and various things. So yeah, but it's also not generally, it's not exactly what we do. I mean, because to
We live in Easton Reading, just because.
get back from the bus stop, my kid has to walk around blind corners, and it's
Yeah.
I think maybe we need to dig into what we really do here, how we really make those calls.
Yeah.
About who gets a bus and who doesn't.
And we have to refer against whatever the statute is that says
Right.
that we provide bus stops and you can't walk more than this distance. But in addition to not walking more than this distance, you shouldn't have to cross a railroad track to get to your bus stop or whatever the other actual rules are. I can't imagine that this policy is purely from statute. I think this is in addition to whatever the statutory requirements are. I can't imagine that there's a statute that talks about thou shalt not walk around a hill. I like snowbank. So part of the time after it snows, the
Right.
bus route has to change because of where the plows push the snow. Like if somebody clears my driveway and makes a snowbank, I have to change the bus route.
Actually, I can speak to that from a lawyer perspective because we had a case in my office about just that, and it was against the city of Millbrook.
Mm.
In the
So
municipal
yeah, there
context?
can be regs about that, so. So let's, all I'm saying is let's be careful with this one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I can imagine a situation where, a previously sort of safe situation becomes unsafe because of, sort of lack of
A very large snowbank.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we're going to research to review applicable statutes and maybe,
And comment thereafter,
yeah. Yeah.
provided it's not by next week. I'll do some research on snowbanks for you.
And next week we canceled, isn't that right?
Right.
Yep.
That's a good question, Chris.
Mm-hmm. Is it possible this is a function of, it's just sloppy, or is it a matter
It
of,
might be sloppy draftsmanship, but I don't know.
yeah.
Again, a point for research.
Yep.
Today's policy committee is concluding with a lot of to be researched.
That's what happens when we're exhausted. We don't want to do the
Yeah.
thinking right now. We just want to defer all the thinking.
No, I think that's really true.
I think that's right. Speaking of which, I think we're 2 minutes before the hour. I think this is a good place to stop.
Let's delete
Yep.
this regulation first. It'll be cathartic.
Yeah, let's get rid of this regulation.
I feel like something got resolved this week.
Wait a
Anywhere in
second,
the world.
though. This goes to policy adopted.
Yeah, I think we,
Oh, there we go.
Yep.
It just goes to here. Okay.
okay, there you go.
Good, good, good. So it's a 1 page.
One page.
That's 1 page less. Okay. Okay. Very good. Well, thanks for yet another fun-filled hour. Let's get ready for this. That brings us to we're going to defer other policy items, and we'll get more specific agenda items for the future. Moves us to public comment. No members of the public being present. That moves us to committee member comment. Hearing none.
Right on time at 10 a.m.
Any objection?
Nope.
Very good. We are adjourned at 10 a.m.
See you in 2 weeks, folks.